Hey everybody, I just wanted to show you why I never blur my background. And that's because my hair looks crazy. Look at this.
That is,
Hello.
it's total mushroom head.
I'm wearing a wig.
Yeah, that looks, I was gonna say, dude, you need to turn that off. That looks
Yeah.
terrible, but you know it. Oh, there it is. There's the curls.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah.
Welcome to Living the Line, where we will not blur our backgrounds because you need to get a deep peek into our lives.
No
Speaking
matter
of,
what
Sean,
it looks like.
what's that? What's that on your artboard back there? That's looking pretty cool.
Oh, that's my son Rowan going nuts with comic making. He's actually made probably like 200 pages worth of comics in the past month.
Oh, wow. So new Living the Line.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well,
You
I
know,
want to see all of that.
yeah, I'll walk you through him sometime. He's very indiscriminate about his art tools, but he'll happily draw with a Crayola marker or a brush pen, uh, Pentel brush pen or a nib. It doesn't really matter to him. He always,
You've got like Dave McKean in the making over there.
yeah, he's very versatile and everything. He's got a good touch with everything, so it's quite good to see. He's probably the only 5-year-old churning out 200 pages a month.
Probably. That's awesome. Well, anyways, I can't think of any good segue from your child being a producer to the book we're looking at, but we're
Well,
looking at an
other than
awesome.
other than the book being narrated by a young artist.
Actually, yeah, I fucked up. Sorry.
Pretend that Carson grabbed that thread and pulled it through. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about a book that, yeah, you and I actually talked to the writer artist on this book um, low on some 19 or 20 months ago.
A
Nick
while, like, yeah.
Pitarra, yeah, while he was working on the campaign for the book, and at the time he had drawn a lot. And he had most of the book in pencil, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And had a handful of sample pages in color. But we interviewed him then. Very distinguished artist with a long career of making really, I would say, wildly detailed, technical adventure art. Is that a
Hmm.
fair assessment?
Yeah, and like really, really imaginative stuff always is the
Hmm.
thing I always associated with Nick Pitarra. And this is no exception. And I think the thing that impressed me when we got the preview from Nick was that it's easy to see this thing being promoted and think it's just blood and guts and action and adventure, but it's really like a heartwarming story with a lot of emotional and character content really at the core of it. And that impressed me a lot from him as a writer, beyond the art being a level up from anything else he's ever done, which is all good already. So very excited to get this in its finished hardcover, the amazing axe wielder Jon.
And this cover is actually painted, hand painted by, I believe he's a Spanish artist, as in from Spain, Das
Yes.
Pastores,
Yes.
who also does a few pages in the back of the book as well. And
Someone who had the incredible task of following up Juan Jimenez on some Meta Bear and stuff and is that awesome of an artist.
right.
So a hell of a cover, and you can definitely feel that kind of Juan Jimenez Meta Baron's vibe to it, but also showing the just stellar character design that Nick came up with, like this image of the dude with the big cop mustache and no nose, and I just that character I think is a great creation.
So, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the very first page gives us um, some background into the story because we see that the narration is actually by a young girl artist who's drawing in her nursery here.
I really dropped the ball on that. I'm sorry. That should have been such an obvious segue. But yeah, it starts out with this girl talking about that she has an overactive imagination, and so I'm just gonna keep making these and writing them down. And I really like that idea that there's some larger story that we barely even get a peek at in this first volume, because this is going to be a multi-volume series. And it's pretty easy to forget about because it like immediately goes into telling you about John, and you can get so wrapped up in that that I don't know. It's almost surprising when that little girl wraps back around for me as a reader.
Yeah. And as you can see from just the first few pages here, I mean, the art is absolutely incredible. Because I had already read this, a year and a half ago, in black and white, though, one of the things that I was really impressed by, was the color. But that's a lot because I had already seen almost all of these pages in
Hmm.
one form or another. But the color is, incredibly mood setting, and you can tell that, they worked really, really hard to have a sort of like a scene keyed color. I don't know if there's really
Hmm.
a term. We've kind of gone back and forth about what to call that on the channel. But scenes being keyed to a certain palette, and really really successful hard edge like animation style cutout color, but then on top of that textured in a very subtle kind of way that makes everything sing.
Yeah, and I think because it has that animation cut style, it looks more but because that's applied to so much detail, it looks more detail, or it looks like it's got gradients and all these other color tricks going on that it doesn't necessarily have in a lot of places. Like on this page here where you're getting introduced to Castle Blackrock, which is like half of the book is set there. First off, amazing design by Nick, but second off, there's so much going on in the color, but also so little because it's only two or three colors per object, really. And I think that's very well handled throughout the book. I love that coloring style, and I think it's just handled exceptionally well in this book.
Yeah, and not, by the way, uniform. The style itself carries out through the entire thing, even though the colors are the responsibility of six different people,
Hmm.
including Nick himself. I believe that the main colorist, Michael Garland, uh, came off the project at some point, and so the actual work was executed by, from a certain point on by the other five people.
Mm. Yeah, it's pretty consistent. There was some where I noticed it definitely got a little more gradienty,
Right.
but overall, like that consistent approach, especially to the textures,
Yeah.
like here in Horace's face, all really stick to that cell shading where you have a highlight, a mid, and a dark, and that's all you get. And
Yeah.
love that approach
And
totally.
that's obviously something that Nick has cultivated and has a strong preference for. Which is why you still have uniformity, even though you have six different people have their
Yeah,
hands
and
in
I
it.
remember him talking to us that he picked that up from one of his very obvious influences, Frank Quietly, and
Right.
that Frank Quietly does that with his colors when he can do it himself, and he wanted to have that look. And it's really a labor intensive approach, and it makes the book feel almost painted, but like keeps it cartoony.
Hmm. Yeah. So this first scene here, Horace is, an administrator at this horrible place. Absolutely horrible place. We don't get a clear idea exactly yet of what is happening at this place, but he's essentially like an administrator, and he's talking to the executioner who is going to retire and is giving him a watch. Uh,
Yeah, this is
and
Frank the Executioner, and this is Marigold on Horace's shoulder, who is a senile oracle.
right, who seems to be accurate still, but is easily alarmed and has all these other problems that you might expect from somebody who's senile. And he's got such a light touch. It's shocking to me that this is the first thing that Nick has written, because he's got such a light touch with the dialogue. Uh, you know, uh, Everybody comes across as they have unique voices, which I think is a real trick to manage right out of the gate.
Yeah, and they each have their own. I think this is what it really struck me about the book right out the place, besides the kind of ending of the first volume, which I don't know if we're going to get into or not. Is that too spoilerly for
I
something
think we
that's
can do it. If you
I,
don't want to dive in deep, folks, then you turn it off when you want to.
yeah, but this has been out and people have read it now. But besides what happens in the ending, we'll say that for the end of the video. I think the thing that impressed me most is that this is like an action adventure barbarian book, but you do have these characters that are basically just bureaucratic characters.
Right.
And so they have these original designs and powers and all of these things, but then they each are their own unique character. They have their own unique concerns, and the majority of the conversation is them just walking around dealing with bureaucratic stuff, and it's hilarious
Right.
on top of everything. So yeah, completely impressive writing abilities, I think, and it really adds a new flavor to this type of adventure that I think is really to the book's benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, bragging to the guy about the watch that he's given him and the depth that it can go, and still function and everything. Um, as you mentioned, the designs are really, really, strong, and obviously down from the main character on. I was shocked when we talked to Nick to find out that he was not familiar with or hasn't read, Battle Angel Alita, which
Mm.
to me has some really strong parallels visually with a lot of the character designs and the sort of animation style finesse to it, the heart with a really uh, you know, grotesque setting and grotesque characters and everything, which I think it's actually a pretty strong parallels between those two. Um,
Mm.
but I think there's a much, much more obvious antecedent to this. And if I was doing an elevator pitch for this book, I would be very tempted to invoke the name of a certain, uh, let's say, child animation property from the early 80s. Uh, I will
Oh,
withhold that name for a little bit longer here, but give it some thought.
I'm going He-Man.
Yeah, hell yeah, you're going, man.
Like if I
Um,
had to guess, as someone who couldn't watch TV during the 80s because I didn't have one, but was very well aware of all the cool toys and well aware of all the things I wasn't allowed to watch, this is very Masters of the Universe to me.
yes. So I had it hadn't occurred to me before, but as I was reading the finished product here, it occurred to me that the pitch that you could make for this would be a ugly He-Man in an extreme environment. Uh, He-Man essentially being this over everything. He's more masculine than anybody else. He's more muscular than anybody else. He's more commanding, and he has his polar opposite in a skeletal figure that lives in a giant snake castle,
Yeah.
um, and
And
and uh, also is surrounded by heroes and villains that all are designed to a T. At the most extreme kinds of ways, as evidenced here by this rogues gallery being slaughtered here, as well as John having a bunch of axes on the inside of his cape, for
yeah,
instance.
I love that. He's like running around and none of them are hurting him. But he's like wildly chopping up. And yeah, the design, I mean, these are all throwaway characters that are killed within a panel or two, right? And each one of them is so well designed it could be its own long-lasting character
Right.
in the book. So it's that level of detail. I mean, this has 80 to
Yep.
150 bad guys
Yep.
in the background. I don't know how many, it's a ton. And if you zoomed into each one of them, they're a unique character. And it is stunning. I think picking up on your Conan, my pitch would be, or not Conan, but
Yeah.
Master He-Man, is that it's basically like if He-Man were allowed to have Game of Thrones level gore combined with like the bureaucratic humor of The Office and then a heart of gold. Like
Right.
it's such a
Yeah.
strange mix, but it works so well. And as
Yeah.
you can see, it's
It's
beautiful.
super unusual mix. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like not off-putting. Although I find a certain level of gore, or I have found a certain level of gore in the past off-putting. I seem to have kind of inured myself to it over time. But I don't think I would have been able to read something like this more than like, 15 years ago or something like that.
Oh, really? I don't. To me, it's like it's so over the top that it's not like a really nasty Junji Ito disgusting thing. It's just kind of extreme over the top cartoon gore. Is
Hmm.
that Do you see a difference between this and like the more body horror kind of just gore as pornography?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. I just know that I would have had a visceral reaction that's before, and I certainly like, you know, this is the other combination of the Battle Angel Alita reason brought that up. I mean, I like made myself sick reading that when I was in high school.
Mm,
I really liked the characters and I really liked the stories, but then people getting like, heads cut in half and stuff. And there's a certain point where that kind of crossed over for me, and I'm like admiring the draftsmanship or something.
yeah.
But I just never I don't have the button for that. You know what I mean? Like it's not it doesn't push a button for me. I wouldn't draw something like that myself because it wouldn't give me any kind of pleasure. It would be the opposite of that.
No, to me it's like the intent, like if it's done where like the characters are getting like a real intense pleasure out of it or something where it's torturous, it can bother me, but like this is just a guy running around chopping up nameless bad guys, so it's not. I mean, you definitely have these guys who are the like Frank here, who's on his last day, is the executioner and the torturer. So there's gonna be some of that built into his character, but again, it's handled with such like a removed bureaucratic approach to things that it's just funny. Like he's
Right.
going through his checklist here: face scalper, eye popper, debowler, ugh, gross, skin peeler. And he's just like checking off that they've gone through and cleaned up the torture devices and that he's explained how to use them to the new guy. That to me puts up like a silly barrier that makes it acceptable.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, like I said, it's not like it phases me now. It's just it's always kind of in my brain. Uh, this puzzler, he insists on being called the puzzler, but he has a perfectly ordinary name. Is a pretty great example of the breadth of the character design. And you can imagine, once again, like you can imagine somebody on the He-Man staff, you imagine Jack Kirby on a lunch break being like, okay, well, I guess I got another bad guy. What do we grab, boys? What are we gonna do? And grabbing a puzzle off the shelf and be like,
Gary the puzzler. Yeah, and all throughout, like each one of these characters, and then that kind of combines with whatever they're up to personality wise, and I think
right.
that's really great. And then here's your Lord Fang, the big snake guy in the castle, and a full body shot of Gary the puzzler. Another impeccable piece of design work, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I I like that you see everything like this. I mean that's the other sort of commonality. I'm sorry, I keep on bringing up something that Nick has never seen before. I don't, when we talk about this type of thing, it doesn't always mean that necessarily that I think that something is an influence. It means that people might arrive at some of the similar kinds of things because they like similar kinds of things, or
Yeah.
have similar backgrounds, or have similar skill sets. But the other thing that I'm commonality I'm noticing here is just that no matter what the action is in one of Nick's in AX-WIELDER Jon, he's always depicting it with the utmost of clarity.
Hmm.
I'm always tempted to obscure my bad anatomy in an action sequence. You know what I mean? Like, what can I do? Like, I want the action to be clear on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't actually want to have to draw it. Do you know what I mean? This is
Yeah,
like the
but he's taken the time to like keep that design so consistent. Like this is one horn that has like that texture over it, and no matter how he turns this character, it's going to be that same one horn. So it's not even just human anatomy. And then the next horn down has like this more diagonal rip on it. There's a sense that every piece of that character is going to remain exactly what it is in the right place and the right number of pieces no matter which way the character turns. And I find that ridiculously impressive because I would have the hardest time imagining that. And it really struck me as funny when we talked to Nick that he was saying, "Oh, he wishes he could do the thing I do where I just sit down with the pen and just go for it." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, I can just sit down with the pen and go for it for one drawing, but I could
Right.
never take that same drawing, no matter how much penciling and struggling I did, get it so perfect. Like, that seems like a much more difficult skill to have." And
Right.
it was just funny to hear him saying like he felt like he was kind of lacking for some reason because he takes such a structural approach to making sure everything's right. And I think it's absolutely phenomenal and laudable.
Well, as the Shags once said in their classic "My Pal Foot Foot," all the tall girls want what the skinny girls get, or what the short girls get, and all the short girls get what the tall girls want.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
there is a lot of that here. I'm very envious of people like Nick for sure.
uh, should I interpret that statement, or can people just go listen to "My Pal Foot Foot" and
I think they get the gist.
okay? Yeah.
The
So
grass is always greener.
yeah, exactly right.
So, anyways, this all of these characters in this big castle led by Lord Fang are have been tasked to take Jon out. And it's obvious throughout all these wild action sequence in the books that that's not going well, and he's like potentially storming the castle, but at least killing everyone that is coming his way. And they've been making a big deal the whole time, and this is where we get to spoiler alert.
Yes.
Uh,
Spoilers. If this bothers you, don't read. Don't listen any further.
yeah, but this is where, beyond the bureaucratic stuff, the end here, the reveal at the end, there are two reveals at the end actually, is what really, really hooked me to the project. So the whole time they're making this big deal about how Jon falls in love with the skulls of the people that he's slain, and we get a reveal of what's actually in those skulls at near the end of the book. And I just thought that was such a
Yeah.
touching thing to take that big mustachioed, no face guy and turn him into a softie.
Yeah, and it says, "Well, you girls just called him dad," and so I mean, there's an awful lot to unpack there. You see, the legend is real. Jon did love his precious skulls. He loved them very much, and we get quite the amazing little bit of character here, and also, I mean, so much promise in terms of what else is up for the series, what this might mean in terms of his motivation, and also, it's just an amazing, such a strong design decision, just as strong as the main character himself.
To have the babies in the skull, yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
And that he's carrying them around on his neck and then taking the design of that big, giant, hairy man with his mustache and showing him being like playful with the kids. That's just not something you ever seen. And even the line here where it says maybe there are good reasons to kill too,
Right.
like Nick's really setting himself up for, I think, a wildly different volume two, three, however long this
Right.
goes than the first one. And that now that he's got that reveal, we can really explore the emotional content while the art continues to be totally fun and wild. And
Well,
yeah, I just
there's at least four covers, so I'm guessing there's going to be at least four books. But
well, hopefully this just keeps going for a long while.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I really love that at the end, and I really love that about the series. And then we get the other major reveal here towards the end of the book, bringing back in that girl from the beginning. And she's saying this wasn't all just imagination. Like, I know this is real because she's saying that she actually found him there with his skulls floating in the water. So she's now supposedly telling a true story, which I'm not sure about. I don't know what your instinct on that, but
hello.
is she telling the truth or is she making things up?
Right. And once again, the design is just absolutely unbelievable. This thing that he's been sleeping on, that the sharks have been gnawing at, uh, which may or may not be half of the body of one of his enemies that he slays um, in that giant montage at the beginning.
Well, I think it's a giant cancer cell.
Interesting.
Because like there's a bit in the end about him talking about his kid being born, and that's when he did it. And I think there's a medical connotation to that.
Interesting.
Um, but anyways, I don't know. Do you think that this girl is making it up, or did she really see him? What's your instinct on this?
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. I'm not positive what the interaction is between the girl here. This seems like a fantasy to me. Her appearance in the actual scene, but we will see. We will see.
Yeah, and I think that like indetermination at the end of the book, even though you get like what seems like a reveal, it's been set up in such a way that you still don't trust the reveal, and that makes me like have two reasons now to really look forward to the next volume is
Right.
watching the father character thing play out and then finding out more about this second framing narrative that's in the book. Like where does that all go? It's all just so well done.
Yeah.
Like perfect first volume of a book, really.
Shall we go to and then we have the few pages of this backup feature. I'm not sure what it adds yet to the main narrative other than some badass pages.
Yeah, I think my instinct is that Nick really loves Das Pastors' art and was really excited to have one of his favorite artists contribute just a sequence about his character.
Right.
I don't know, like, I don't even get the sense that this is necessarily something that's going to continue in later volumes. I'm
Mm.
not sure because I know Das Pastors has done some of the other covers, but it could just be that this is like if we could hire our favorite artist to contribute to our book, we
Right.
would do it no matter what, right? And you
Yeah.
see why he loves Das Pastors' art is it's fucking phenomenal.
Yeah. You get an idea of or we should just say what the actual mechanic is here. This is the origin of the skulls that he's carrying around. Is basically he's killed a giant boar and tosses the boar head into this piranha filled moat and then pulls it out. And then he's got a home for another one of the babies.
Yeah. So it does contribute, but I think it's just mostly an excuse to have like a really awesome guest
Right.
artist. And then you get all kinds of cool extras in this, including this bit in the back where he's talking about it being in the neonatal care unit when he first drew this sketch. And so you
Right.
get the sense that, well, I mean, not the sense, like it's very obvious how personal this book is to Nick. And that's where I think like that Heart of Gold just absolutely shines through because he is telling a story that's absolutely personal. It's absolutely the kind of stuff he wants to draw too. Like he's having a blast doing it and it means everything to him. And I think that just makes it a stellar piece and very like obviously worth owning.
Yeah. So let's go to face here and talk about that last component here. Oh,
Well,
you
one other
guys.
thing I wanted to
Yeah.
point out on camera is this like development section here in the back. And this is really cool because you're talking about how good the writing is, and it's showing that because he's friends with and a longtime collaborator with Jonathan Hickman, who's like one of the top artists in the mainstream comic industry right now, he had the benefit of sending his script over with the sketches to Hickman and getting story and like just script feedback. And he's got those notes in here. And I think that's just a really good example for people who are writing their first project. You can go in there and kind of see how a pro took a newbie and helped them craft it. I found that to be a really fun extra in the book that would be informative to a lot of people. And then also just showing that there are some cool guest artists in the back, a lot of people that we enjoy, but particularly wanted to shout out the Ed Lutz or Lucy piece, who is the, if you're gonna get a guest artist, no better person that you can get than the bear loving artist of the lovable oath. And I think that was a pretty awesome piece. So yeah, enjoyable package, all kinds of cool extras. Definitely get yourself a copy.
So amazing book, uh, incredible project. Can't wait to see what happens next. I want to say too that I'm very interested in this from an industry perspective as well. This if this had been a different decade or a different year. Obviously, Nick has done projects with lots of places, including Image. You could see this being a miniseries, an Image miniseries that then gets spun out into another miniseries or something like that. But for a variety of reasons, the market conditions did not seem like that was the smart thing to do, and instead, Nick had an incredible campaign to support this book when it was being still in the process of being made, and obviously selling that in advance and having incredible success doing so. So my question is, and the thing that I'm going to be keeping my eye on is when this ends up in distribution, if this ends up in distribution, where this ends up in distribution, what the format is going to be for that. Are you going to be able to buy it, in a bookstore? Are you going to be able to, at some point, get it at a library? Is it going to be reviewed in places that review places like that? And does it matter? Is the other thing, because obviously, it's a runaway success in terms of, hopefully, financial, recompense for very involved drawing process. I mean, obviously, any one of these pages is probably a week's worth of work.
Yeah, at least a
So,
few days.
right, yeah, I mean, yeah, quite amount. This is not an ordinary level of drawing. So I will be curious to see how all of those things kind of roll out from here. And I don't have a intuition about it at all. I'm just kind of like observing, like to me, this is an obvious sell to be in French translation and Italian translation and Dutch translation and German translation.
Yeah.
This should be in Arabic and should be sold into those markets. Does that happen? Uh,
Well,
you know,
he also broke it up in these chapters that are basically the length of I was actually thinking about a lot of the same stuff when I was reading it yesterday, because it's broken up into chapters that work so well as chapters that could be released as individual issues. Is he setting himself up for the same thing that Matt Lesniewski did with Faceless in the Family? And I was thinking this actually is a really interesting future model, where right now so many people release the single issues, and then if that does well enough, then they can get the hardcover collection, which is what the creator really wants, right? That vision of the final thing. This is a really interesting model that flips everything, and it's actually kind of flipping things in some of the same ways that I think you and I were both frustrated with Dave about on Strange Death of Alex Raymond, where he wanted to do like sell the art first, then do an artist edition with like the art with the catalog, then an artist edition, then the hardcover release. And we both were like, man, this is so backwards. But we're kind of seeing the same thing now, where they're doing the hardcover first, you're selling it as an exclusive thing that goes just to your solid fan base, and then that funds and gets you your money. Then you can release it as people who want to buy it cheap and want the monthly floppy format. That is actually an interesting strategy to me, because I think there's a lot of projects that probably don't get the nice hardcover collection that could, if they kickstarted for that and then sold the other one direct market as floppies. That's the thing that I'm paying attention to, because I think that's a very smart strategy moving forward, as I'm personally looking for ways to foreground the creator, but not fuck over all of our collaborators like the retailers and the distributors that do help these things get to libraries and to the wider market. I feel like a lot of people have lost out by going just Kickstarter, you know, because then you have 500 people or whatever, and then that's the most, they're never going to get rid of it. Like no one else will ever see your work.
Right, and I don't know. I wanted to be clear. I'm agnostic about this. What do I know, right?
Yeah.
Because you know, I have been able to do the thing that I'm doing at the scale that I'm doing it at. That doesn't mean that I know anything beyond the thing that I'm currently doing right now.
Yeah.
I just know that I'll give you an example that's a little bit more concrete, because I actually have no idea what's going to happen with this, and there's all
Yeah.
different types of possibilities, right? But I'll give you an example that's more concrete. If you wanted to purchase Linnea Sturt's Frog and Spring right now, how would you do it?
Oh, I mean, from the publisher at
Right.
best, but even that was like, I think it went out of print and they brought it back just because the Eisners.
Yes. So this is a classic. This is a modern classic, right? To me, Frog and Spring should be in, you know, 1,000 libraries across the
Oh, for
country.
sure.
Uh,
For sure.
so that's the thing. Like Nick is the publisher, right? Nick can
Hmm.
put this out whenever he wants. Nick can get a distributor if he wants with his publisher status, right? Nick can do all of those things, but Linnea is not the publisher on her book.
Yeah.
Presumably, the design is copyright the publisher, right? Presumably, the files were set up by the publisher. I'm not picking on them, by the way. I'm using this as an example of another book that I think, like, if I'm trying to make an argument for graphic novels in 2023 and the amazing work that's being done, I'm going to show people a copy of this if they have a strong stomach. I'm going to show people a copy of Linnea Sturt's book. But
Yeah.
how the hell do I do that if you can't buy it, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I'm curious about is what is the integrated model? What's the halfway model? You know, is there a model where you make it the exact book that you want to make it, which he made it the exact book that he wanted to make it. The things that he described he wanted to happen happened, right?
Yeah,
Every page
exactly.
got
Yeah.
colored to specification. Every scene got lit the way that he wanted. He got his hero to paint some pages in the back that are a backup. He added 20 pages of sketches that people who hadn't even read the book yet gave him fan sketches, right? All of these
Fans,
things.
fellow artists. Yeah.
Exactly. All of those things are things that would not have happened had this been an image book. They would not
Oh, yeah.
happen if this came out with Dark Horse. This would not have happened if it came out in some other place. So he won, right?
Yeah.
What I want to know is what happens next. All the people who bought this are probably going to be very happy with their book and probably are going to want volume two, right? So that
Oh, for
that
sure.
as the goal is going to be accomplished, right? I just want to know what the next. I'll be very curious to see what happens next because this is
Well,
all. It's an interesting time, you
I
know.
I've seen one other artist, and like Nick has the benefit of being someone who has been successful, way more, even way more successful than Nick in the mainstream industry.
Hmm.
Sean Gordon Murphy, who's had wild success with some of his Batman stuff, had wild success in the creator-owned space with big name writers like Rick Remender and Scott Snyder, and then went and did his own book, Plot Holes, that was crowdfunded, and then a year or two later started coming out as single issue floppies. And he's now doing that with Zorro as well, where he somehow got the right to make Zorro himself and is self-publishing it currently through a Kickstarter or some kind of crowdfunding campaign. And then I'm sure is following the model going to then release them as a 4 issue mini series later. I think there's also some artist editions like baked into the campaign. So you have that artist edition, you have all the special stuff coming out up front, and then the other stuff coming like a year, like the plot holes one was a year or 2 years later. My
Hmm.
so it is a model that people are working on, and I've heard Sean Gordon Murphy talk about it as a way that he's making boatloads of money, but he has a huge name backing it ahead of time. I think someone like Linnea Sturt is never gonna have the Batman audience already baked in. But the thing that I will laud Nick for that has really bothered me about how Sean Gordon Murphy and a couple other creators I've seen taking this route go is they're charging ridiculous prices. Like the Plot Holes book is about as long as this, maybe a little longer, and it was a $50 book, I think, for a hardcover. And this on the back is a $40 book, and I like to sell. I mean, we did Strange Death, which is a 300-page book for $40 hardcover. I mean, I know it wasn't in color. So I've seen some people doing this route, but I just can't stomach the prices that they're going for. I think you've got to be kind to your Kickstarter audience, and if they're paying more than the direct market book market version is going to be, it should be coming with signatures and book plates and all this kind of stuff. And the copy I got of Plot Holes is just a copy of a book. And then when it came out later, as a miniseries, it was like, well, what the fuck, man? Like, and a little bit disappointed, like with Matt Lesniewski's book too, because same thing. It came out from Zoop, which did Wielder Jon. They didn't overcharge for that. It was reasonably priced for what it is. But then now it's like coming out from Oni Press with like better production on the inside. And so it's this weird in between thing. I think people are figuring it out. I think it's a really good idea, but I also think people need to be a little bit more honest with themselves about what the value of these things actually are, because there's a real risk that people are going to burn out the finances on the audience in these campaigns by trying to make more, because they're trying to justify ahead of time the money that they need to produce the book. And I'm very
Right.
skeptical about that. Like you or I would never run a campaign until a book was done. And I know
Right.
people need to make a living, but I do think that's something that a lot of creators really need to think about as they move towards this model, which I think is a good model. It's just going to take some more risk. Like I know Nick was selling a bunch of his original art. He was selling all these assets to fund the time, and then it still took another 2 years or so to for the book to come out. And
We should
creators got to be careful.
yeah, no, I absolutely, and I should also say too, I know that this is not a new model. It's just easier to reach people now.
Yeah.
At least one cartoonist of my acquaintance who I can't spill the beans on this particular thing. Somebody I know pre-sold the original art for the entire book. A Fantagraphics cartoonist, let's say,
Okay.
uh, pre-sold the art for an entire book to a collector in order to draw the book.
Mm.
And I know this for a fact. And you know, in that person's case, it was a very good canny move because especially when you have benefactors of a type or people that money is not as significant to them, I think that makes more sense. But you're absolutely right that that is one of the dangers of that kind of direct sell. And definitely one of the things that I'm very cognizant of somebody whose entire model relies on people. I mean, I always want to make sure that people are very pleased with what it is that they got. And yeah, this is all independent of the book, by the way. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
just sort of a conversation that's piggybacking on this project. Because yeah, I think that there's a real responsibility to the audience to make sure that they're getting the thing that they paid for. Yeah,
Well, and we're
and in this
piggybacking
case,
it on this book because Nick made such an exceptional product. He had
right,
such success with it. He had a great marketing campaign, and it's pre-cooked into how the book's formatted that
right.
this could be re-released as single issues. It could be recollected again all as one hardcover. And I think those kind of approaches are very smart from creators to set yourself up for multiple instantiations of the same project.
Mhm.
As more and more people hear about it, then you have other ways that they can get to it. And I think this backwards model is pretty cool. Like I'm interested in it. I'll be paying attention to it. I'll try and figure out a way to use it. But anyways, I do think you and I should get together at some point. So promo for a future video. where we talk about this more, because there's more things that I've been thinking about, some things that I think you and I both are curious about as we try and figure out what the comics market can look like as we move into the future to be best for the medium and best for creators. That's a
Right.
conversation I really want to have.
Absolutely. And it is a odd time when I don't think there's any exaggeration to say some of the greatest cartoonists ever to live are working right now on projects. And yet, you
Total
know,
obscurity.
exactly right. It's a wild time. But yeah, that's for another day. So
Yeah.
thanks. My goodness. Get yourself a copy. I don't even know. I think they have remaindered copies right now. I mean, they overprinted some amount. I don't know what it is, but get yourself a copy.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.